the 4-4-2. For decades, it was football's most iconic setup. 4 defenders, 4 midfielders, 2 strikers. Simple, balanced, effective. But today, it's almost extinct at the highest level. So what happened? How did a formation that dominated world football for over 30 years suddenly become outdated? And could it ever make a comeback? This is the rise and fall of 4-4-2, football's most legendary formation. Imagine you're a kid in the 1990s. You turn on the TV to watch Manchester United, AC Milan, or even the England national team. What do you see? 4-4-2. Always 4-4-2. It wasn't just a formation, it was the formation. But to understand why 4-4-2 became so dominant, we need to go back to its origins. Football formations weren't always about balance. In the early days of the sport, teams played with formations like 2-3-5. Yes, 5 forwards. It was all out attack. Defence was an afterthought. But as the game evolved, so did the thinking. Teams needed structure. They needed balance. And in the 1960s, the 4-4-2 began to take shape. The formation really exploded in the 1966 World Cup, when England manager Alf Ramsey used it to win England's only World Cup. Ramsey called his version the wingless wonders, because instead of traditional wingers, he used more compact, hard-working midfielders. What made the 4-4-2 special was its perfect balance. The 4 defenders provided a solid backline. The 4 midfielders, 2 in the centre and 2 on the wings, controlled the middle and provided width. And up front, you had a partnership of 2 strikers who could play off each other. Think of it like a perfectly balanced seesaw. Not too attacking, not too defensive. Just right. By the 1980s and 1990s, 4-4-2 had become football's default setting. It was so dominant that kids playing in the park would automatically set up in this formation without even thinking about it. The golden age of 4-4-2 came in the 1990s and early 2000s. Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United dynasty was built on it. AC Milan dominated with it. Arsenal's Invincibles used a version of it. What made these teams so successful wasn't just the formation, it was the partnerships within it. The strike partnerships were legendary. Andy Cole and Dwight Yorke at Manchester United, Alan Shearer and Chris Sutton at Blackburn, the famous SAS partnership that fired Blackburn to the Premier League title in 1995, Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp at Arsenal. One striker would often drop deeper to link play, while the other stayed high to finish chances. It was like a dance. When one went short, the other went long. In midfield, you had the perfect balance too. At Manchester United, Roy Keane provided the steel, while Paul Scholes provided the creativity. At AC Milan, Gennaro Gattuso did the dirty work, while Andrea Pirlo pulled the strings. And on the wings, you had players who could cross, players who could cut inside, players who could do both. David Beckham's crosses from the right for Manchester United, Ryan Giggs' mazy runs from the left. The 4-4-2 wasn't just effective, it was beautiful to watch when done right. But nothing lasts forever in football. And in the mid-2000s, the 4-4-2 began to face its biggest challenge. The revolution started in Spain. Managers like Frank Rijkaard and later Pep Guardiola at Barcelona began using a 4-3-3 formation with 3 central midfielders. This gave them an extra man in the middle of the park. Suddenly, teams playing 4-4-2 found themselves outnumbered in midfield. Their 2 central midfielders were up against 3, sometimes even 4, opposition midfielders. It was like trying to play chess when your opponent has an extra queen. You're always one step behind. The final nail in the coffin came in the 2009 Champions League final. Manchester United, still playing their trusted 4-4-2, faced Barcelona's 4-3-3. The result? Barcelona dominated possession and won 2-0. United's midfield duo of Michael Carrick and Anderson were completely overrun by Barcelona's trio of Xavi, Iniesta and Busquets. It was a tactical mismatch and the football world took notice. After that, even the most stubborn 4-4-2 loyalists began to adapt. Sir Alex Ferguson, who had won everything with 4-4-2, started using a 4-3-3 or 4-5-1 in big European games. The message was clear. In modern football, controlling the midfield was everything, and to control the midfield you needed numbers. But it wasn't just about numbers, the game was changing in other ways too. Players were becoming more athletic, more technical. Fullbacks weren't just defenders anymore, they were expected to attack too. Wingers weren't just crossers, they were expected to score goals. The specialised roles that made 4-4-2 work were disappearing. Football was becoming more fluid, more positional, less rigid. And then there was the rise of the false nine, a striker who drops deep into midfield rather than staying high up the pitch. Players like Lionel Messi at Barcelona and later Roberto Firmino at Liverpool redefined what a forward could be. The traditional strike partnerships that were the heartbeat of 4-4-2 were becoming extinct. Teams preferred one central striker supported by wide forwards who could cut inside. By the 2000s, 4-4-2 had become almost a dirty word in elite football. It was seen as outdated, inflexible, easy to play against. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because while most top teams abandoned 4-4-2, a few stubborn managers kept the faith, and sometimes it worked spectacularly. Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid is the best example. In an era of possession football, Simeone built a 4-4-2 team based on defensive solidity, counter-attacking, and incredible work rate. In 2014, they shocked the world by winning La Liga ahead of Barcelona and Real Madrid. They even reached the Champions League final, only losing in extra time to their city rivals, Real Madrid. Simeone proved that 4-4-2 could still work, but only if you had the right players with the right mentality, and only if you accepted that you wouldn't dominate possession. Leicester City's miracle Premier League win in 2016 was another example. Manager Claudio Ranieri used a counter-attacking 4-4-2 with Jamie Vardy and Shinji Okazaki up front, N'Golo Kante and Danny Drinkwater in midfield, and Riyad Mahrez providing magic from the right wing. They didn't have much possession, but they were organised, disciplined, and lethal on the break. It was 4-4-2 at its most effective. But these were exceptions, not the rule. At the highest level, 4-4-2 had been replaced by more modern formations, the 4-3-3, the 4-2-3-1, the 3-4-3, and others. So is 4-4-2 dead? Not exactly. It's more like it's hibernating, waiting for the right moment to make a comeback. Football is cyclical. Tactics that seem outdated can suddenly become effective again when the game evolves. We're already seeing some teams use variations of 4-4-2, like the 4-4-2 diamond with a narrow midfield four. And in certain situations, when defending a lead, when playing against a specific opponent, when dealing with injuries, even the most progressive managers will sometimes switch to the 4-4-2. The formation's greatest strength was always its simplicity and balance. Those qualities never go out of style completely. So what can we learn from the rise and fall of 4-4-2? First, that football is always evolving. What works today might not work tomorrow. Second, that there's no perfect formation, only the right formation for your players and your opponent. And third, that sometimes the simplest ideas are the most effective. 4-4-2 worked for so long because it was easy to understand, easy to coach, and when done right, very difficult to play against. Will 4-4-2 ever dominate world football again like it did in the 1990s? Probably not. The game has moved on. Midfield control's too important. Players are too versatile to be restricted to rigid positions. But will we see teams use 4-4-2 and succeed? Absolutely. Football has a way of surprising us. Just when we think something is obsolete, someone comes along and proves us wrong. The 4-4-2 might be down, but it's definitely not out. Which position in the 4-4-2 do you think is the most difficult or easiest to play? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed learning about football formations, hit subscribe for more Football Explainer videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.